Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea wins back its #1 spot in the shipbuilding industry, overtaking China with orders worth more than $2.5 billion. High-level defense talks lined up this week between South Korea and the U.S. on a range of issues, including the cost of South Korea's defense. And President Moon holds this week's cabinet meeting in Busan, the city that in 2 weeks will be hosting key summit meetings with leaders from Southeast Asia. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. There's a number of major security issues that are going to be discussed between Seoul and Washington this week, with much attention on the fate of the Seoul-Tokyo bilateral intel sharing pact. Oh Jung-hee has more.
A series of security meetings are lined up this week between South Korea and the U.S. that could touch upon some heavy defense issues, like the transfer of wartime operational control, termination of GSOMIA, and Seoul-Washington defense cost sharing. First up is the military committee meeting on Thursday. Attended by the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff from both sides, the main talking point is to be Seoul retaking wartime operational control from Washington. The two allies have already conducted joint training to test Seoul's initial operational capability for the envisioned transfer. On Friday, the South Korea-U.S. Security Consultative Meeting is to take place, attended by the defense chiefs. The two sides are to discuss the recent security situation surrounding the Korean peninsula and a few alliance issues like sharing the cost of stationing U.S. troops in South Korea. Washington has reportedly demanded that Seoul pay nearly $5 billion for next year, which is over 5 times what Seoul is paying right now. And just as important, trilateral security cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan is to be discussed. That discussion will certainly touch upon GSOMIA, the bilateral intel sharing pact between South Korea and Japan that's to automatically expire next Saturday. Seoul decided to terminate it in August after Japan adopted export curbs against South Korea, citing a breach of trust and security issues. The Pentagon has said the U.S. wants to see the GSOMIA issue resolved, meaning Seoul should keep the deal. Discussions on GSOMIA will continue on afterwards. After holding the Security Consultative Meeting, both defense chiefs are flying to Thailand for ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting. Here, the military chiefs of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are to sit down for trilateral talks, and a bilateral meeting between Seoul and Tokyo could also happen. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
On that note, South Korea and Japan are planning to hold talks next week at the ASEAN Defense and Security Meeting in Thailand. South Korea's defense ministry said today that Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do and Japan's Taro Kono are making final preparations for a meeting sometime between November 16th and the 19th. It stressed, however, that the meeting is not yet confirmed. According to Tokyo-based Kyodo News, the Japanese defense minister plans to ask Chung to cancel South Korea's plan to terminate the two countries' military intel sharing pact known as GSOMIA. As things stand now, GSOMIA will expire on November 23rd. If a face-to-face meeting does happen, it would be the first one since October last year. The chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff has claimed that the average American would question whether American troops really need to be stationed in South Korea and Japan. That remark, made Sunday by General Mark A. Milley, is seen possibly as a way to put pressure on Seoul and Tokyo to pay more for their defense by suggesting that a U.S. troop presence cannot be taken for granted. Regarding South Korea's decision to terminate the intel sharing pact, GSOMIA, Milley said the deal is critical to regional security. Milley is scheduled to attend the South Korea-U.S. Security Consultative Meeting in Seoul on Friday, along with the U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper. South Korean President Moon Jae-in held his regular cabinet meeting today in Busan, where anticipation's building for the special summit with Southeast Asian countries just 2 weeks from now. There, President Moon called his mission to boost Korea's partnership with ASEAN a national development strategy. Our Park Hee-jun has more.
President Moon Jae-in has reaffirmed his commitment to advancing South Korea's ties with Southeast Asia, which is one of his administration's key foreign policy goals.
신남방 정책은 대한민국 국가 발전 전략의 핵심입니다. 아세안은 세계 어느 지역보다 성장이 빠르고 앞으로 성장 잠재력도 매우 큽니다. 우리는 아세안과 함께 아시아의 평화와 공동 번영의 미래를 열어야 합니다.
During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, President Moon said Korea's hosting of these summits with ASEAN and Mekong countries demonstrates his government's devotion to promoting ties with Southeast Asia. To raise anticipation for the event and to see how the preparations are going, Tuesday's cabinet meeting was even held in Busan, the host city for the summits. The president cited the efforts by the administration to strengthen relations with Southeast Asia. They include his visits to all 10 ASEAN members and the enhanced cooperation in diplomacy, economy, and culture at a pace not seen before. He highlighted the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the world's biggest trade deal which covers 30% of global trade. When RCEP is signed next year, hopefully with India, President Moon anticipates that the deal will further expand free trade, is vital for their co-prosperity.
우리 경제의 외연 확대와 한 아세안 상생 번영을 위해 자유무역 정지는 필수입니다. 이 점에서 RCEP 타결은 우리와 아세안 간의 투자 교역 여건을 개선하고 신남방 정책을 더욱 가속화하는 계기가 될 것입니다.
The Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit also drew international attention over the possibility that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might visit. While President Moon did emphasize the importance of working toward peace on the Korean peninsula, he did not directly mention anything regarding Kim's visit. He was likely aware of how unlikely a visit by Kim would be amid uneasy inter-Korean relations, but the Blue House is keeping its door open. A senior Blue House official said Monday that although there are no developments to share, organizers continue to make preparations, remaining open to all possibilities. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
In the 2.5 years since he took office, President Moon's traveled to 349 different places across the country to meet with the people and listen to their voices. The Blue House said today that in total he's traveled nearly 60,000 kilometers, the equivalent of 1.5 times around the world. And on average, he's taken a trip once every 2.6 days. The top office said these trips are a way of seeking new and innovative growth engines, boosting the economy and comforting people dealing with accidents and disasters. Arirang TV, the station you're watching now, has been chosen as the main English-language broadcaster for the Korea-ASEAN Special Summit to be held 2 weeks from now in Busan. We'll be bringing you live coverage of the major events of the summit, which runs from November 25th to the 27th. Arirang will also host discussions and in-depth analyses with experts as well as foreign journalists. Our news team will be on standby at the main press center to bring you all the latest details from Busan as they happen. North Korea's envoy to the UN has slammed the U.S. for the recent lack of progress in improving the two countries' relations. He insists the regime's been trying to build lasting peace on the Korean peninsula, but Washington is spoiling the atmosphere. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
North Korea's ambassador to the UN, Kim Sung, is pressing Washington to abide by the joint statement adopted by their leaders in Singapore last year. Speaking in New York on Monday at a General Assembly meeting on the International Atomic Energy Agency, Kim claimed the U.S. is entirely to blame for the, quote, vicious cycle of aggravated tension being witnessed on the Korean peninsula. He also accused the South Korean government of engaging in, quote, double-dealing behavior. The envoy also said scant progress has been made in regards to the relationship between Pyongyang and Washington due to political and military provocations perpetrated by the U.S. He also told the 193-member General Assembly that Pyongyang has made proactive efforts in good faith to establish lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. He explained the regime has refrained from testing nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missiles for more than 20 months. However, acting IAEA Director General Colonel Faruta pointed out that the North's nuclear activities are still a cause for serious concern, and they clearly violate the UN Security Council resolutions. He called on the North to comply with its UN obligations and cooperate promptly with the international nuclear watchdog. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that Iran is enriching uranium at an underground site near the village of Fordow in the most serious breach yet of the 2015 nuclear deal. Iran had announced last week that it was doing so, and it was confirmed in an IAE report released Monday. The Fordow site is heavily fortified in a mountain and is believed to be impenetrable by most conventional weapons. This is the latest in a series of steps Tehran's taken since July to move away from the nuclear deal, which the U.S. withdrew from last year. A record number of shipbuilding orders and order value in October is expected to have helped South Korea keep its top position in the shipbuilding industry, which has faced fierce competition from China. Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea overtook China to reclaim its #1 spot in global shipbuilding orders last month. Data by Clarkson Research Services shows Korea won orders totaling 1.29 million compensated gross tons in October. That's up more than 300% on year. Order value also went up threefold to $2.6 billion last month, reaching a record high. This came on the back of growing LNG projects and increasing orders of eco-friendly ships due to stricter environmental regulations across the world. Korea won a total of 17 ships, including 4 LNG ships and 11 very large crude oil carriers, accounting for more than 80% of ship orders placed worldwide last month. In the first 10 months through October, Korea has won near $16 billion of orders, which is more than any other country. Korea is followed by China, Italy, and Japan. Order volume went down 35% to 6.9 million CGTs between January and October, but was still the highest in the world, surpassing China's 6.1 million CGTs. South Korea's trade ministry says the increase in global orders for value-added ships like LNG carriers is expected to continue on demand from Qatar, Mozambique, and Nigeria until early next year, and expects Korea to secure its #1 spot in shipbuilding order value and volume for this year. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
GSOMIA Group has announced a preferred bidder for its controlling stake in Korea's second biggest carrier, Asiana Airlines. It's a consortium led by Hyundai Development Company, which reportedly bid around $2 billion for GSOMIA's stake of 31%. Beating out its rivals, one of which was a consortium led by local cosmetics company Aegyeong Industry. The HDC consortium has already passed the Transport Ministry's screening process and is set to begin talks with GSOMIA. Asiana recorded a loss in the first half of the year of around $250 million, and its debts amounted to more than $8 billion. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you very much for having me today.
So still no U.S.-China trade deal. Mixed news coming in from both sides. That and the escalating protests in Hong Kong, another risk factor. How are the global markets doing today?
Yes, with that news of the Hong Kong protest happening yesterday, Asian market, particularly the Hong Kong and Chinese market, showed quite significant drop in the share prices. The HSI, the Hang Seng Index Hong Kong, was down more than 2.4% after the police fired live rounds for the protesters on the eastern side of Hong Kong Island. Now, however, though, if you look at the price performance of today, most of the market have seemed to kind of recover from that incident, as the Nikkei was up about 0.8%, and the Kospi is up about 0.8%. In general, the Asian market seems to be recovering from that incident news. Clearly, the uncertainty about the Hong Kong riot situation puts them to the concern to the overall global equity market. But we think that this is an economic issue rather than democratic per se issue, making that it's in a direction where the money should be flowing in the right areas rather than just focusing on Hong Kong area. So we think that the concern is there, but it's not going to be the case where it will create a huge crisis in the Asian market. So therefore, the market seems to be recovering from yesterday and somewhat doing quite a strong performance today.
Yeah, you mentioned a recovery in the Kospi, for example. Maybe the Kospi finding a little support level there, or what do you see happening in Korean stocks?
Yes, Korean market did recover today, as you said. The Kospi was up about 0.79%. Kosdaq is up 0.57% after yesterday's fall. So it is a recent recovery that we're seeing. The Kospi index itself did quite a performance in the last month, but recently it had underperformed the market with the won appreciation having too much, and then it was showing somewhat of a depreciation happening yesterday, and that all resulted into the price underperformance. But today it seems that it is recovering. Korean won also is showing a appreciation. We think that is probably likely case in the future that the Korean won should stabilize at current rate of around 1160 territories. We think that is fairly valued. The Korean equity market's performance may be rather not performed relative to the global market, but it is probably should be pretty similar to what global market is doing. Overall, the sentiment in regards to the IT sector seems to be quite strong still, and if that continues, then Korean equity market should do reasonably well relative to the global equity market.
Yeah, and speaking more globally, broadly, the Chinese investment is picking up again in Europe, particularly with the acquisition of some key manufacturing and service companies there. Why has that happened, and what does it mean for the global economy?
Well, I think that's probably the most obvious case where the U.S. and China are competing not just on the trading related, but trying to win the next era of the fourth industrial revolution. These two countries are fighting over who's going to be the leader of the global economy. Yes, still U.S. is the largest with 24% of the total economic size relative to global, whereas China is around 17%. But China seems to be pretty much trying to focus on winning this fourth industrial revolution era and trying to create the additional competitive advantage. Right now, U.S. has the competitive advantage given the fact that the consumer market size is about 3 times bigger than China, and that is the reason why the U.S. can try to put tariff as the means to force the Chinese to change their way of doing business. But given the fact that the manufacturing segment market share is very large for China, which is same size as the U.S., that's why they're trying to create competitiveness in regards to the manufacturing industries. Now, with that, also they're trying to create bigger consumer market, the service industry as well, and that's why China needs to work well with the European countries, trying to create additional competitive advantages. Given the fact that European countries seems to be pretty much neutral between U.S. versus China, especially with the U.S. trying to put more tariffs on for European market. So all being said, China is competing with the U.S. trying to be the number one influencer of the global economy. Whether or not the Chinese will be successful, that's something to watch and see.
Europe certainly is under pressure from the other side as well under the Trump administration. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks again for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba's shattered last year's sales record for Singles Day, the world's biggest shopping event. South Korean companies enjoyed the third highest sales numbers. Lee Seung-jae reports.
November 11th is Singles Day in China, and also the day of the world's biggest online shopping bonanza. Smashing last year's record of $30.8 billion, Alibaba, China's biggest e-commerce company, set a new record on Monday, logging an astonishing $38 billion in sales.
Based on Alibaba's commercial operations system, our Singles Day offered a festival to brands, vendors and buyers. We hope Singles Day can drive the domestic consumption in China and keep activating the transformation and upgrading of China's economy.
However, the on-year increase of about 25% is slightly lower than the rate of growth Alibaba recorded in 2018, when the company reported a 27% jump. Analysts say the slightly weaker growth this year comes amid China's slowing economy and Beijing's trade war with the United States. Singles Day is also an opportunity for South Korean companies, as the Chinese market is home to 1.3 billion consumers. A considerable amount of South Korean companies record sales higher than their annual sales on Singles Day alone. K-beauty, which is popular in China, have helped sales of Korean cosmetic brands such as Amore Pacific, LG Household and Healthcare, and Aegyeong explode. For the second straight year, South Korea was third among foreign countries to have sold the most goods on Singles Day. From midnight on Monday to 1 a.m. the following day, 84 South Korean companies enjoyed combined sales of over $14 million. South Korean companies only trailed US and Japanese firms in terms of sales. South Korea first made the top 3 in 2016. However, tensions between Seoul and Beijing over South Korea's deployment of the THAAD missile defense system saw the country slump to 5th in 2017. 이승재, Arirang News.
Boeing says it expects its 737 MAX airliners to return to commercial service in January. The 737 MAX has been grounded in some 40 countries since March, following 2 deadly crashes that killed nearly 350 people. Boeing said Monday that it's working to get approval from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration to put the plane back into service. The company also listed 5 safety-related processes the 737 MAX has to go through before then. The first step, it said, was completed last week. News of a January relaunch sent Boeing's share price up 5%. South Korea's biggest video game exhibition, G-Star, kicks off this Thursday in Busan. Running through Sunday at the Bexco Convention Center, G-Star will feature game exhibitions, business consulting sessions, conferences, and other events. New this year is the G-Star Indie Showcase, aimed at supporting indie game developers with space and equipment. For those in Busan, do note that traffic will be blocked in front of the venue for safety. Many of us simply can't get to sleep at night without checking our smartphones, but new research indicates that doing so could have long-term impacts on our mental health. Oh Soo-young has more.
Scrolling through social media or watching an online video before you sleep are activities that could lead to depression or anxiety. That's according to researchers at Seoul-based Seongjin Women's University, who conducted a study on the effects of bedtime procrastination. The use of smartphones was seen as one of the biggest reasons for delaying sleep. A survey on 106 people in their 20s and 30s showed that those who put off their bedtime used their smartphones almost 5 times longer than the average person. They also tended to use their devices for an hour longer every day. The research team says these pre-bedtime distractions could impact your health and mental well-being, increasing your chance of becoming depressed by 25% and developing anxiety by 14%. Also, activities that delay your sleep increase the risk of insomnia by 41%. And that risk is even higher at 82% for those who use their smartphones before they sleep. To reduce the chance of developing such long-term mental health complications, the research team stresses the importance of keeping a regular bedtime. The study was published in the November edition of US-based journal Sleep. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.